Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Brilliant as the Sun, a retelling of Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 4. We are reading from chapter 9 at the moment. Dhruva returns home. So let us begin. And as we are reading, it's solar eclipse, which is on at the moment. So what best than to read Lord's pastimes and Srimad Bhagavatam, in Srimad Bhagavatam during the solar eclipse. So let us begin. So I'll begin. Lord is telling Dhruva Maharaj that now please hear what shall become of your stepmother Suruchi. Because of her offense to you, she will become mad when her son Uttam is killed on a hunting exhibition. She will go to the forest in search of him and perish in a forest fire. Dhruva looked down. This was all his fault. Verses 24 to 26 now. Vishnu continued. Now hear more about yourself. You will not engage your material opulence for sense gratification, but for sacrifice and charity. Since I am the heart of sacrifice, you will think of me throughout your sojourn in the material world. Thus, at the time of death, you will remember me. When this body is finished, you will go to the pole star, that is the Dhruva, which is one of my eternal spiritual planets. So, pole star or the Dhruva is one of the eternal spiritual planets of the Lord. It is worshipped by the residents of all other planets and is situated above the planets of the 7 sages. After going there, you will never return to the material realm, my dear Dhruva, because I am pleased with your worship. You will reside with me on my own planet, the pole star. Prishnigarbha then mounted upon Garuda and returned to his own abode. Verse 27, Maitreya concluded, although the Lord had granted his desire, Dhruva was not happy. He returned home with a heavy heart. Rising to his feet, the sage said, Vidur, you must be hungry. You have not eaten anything since yesterday. Wait here, I shall gather some edibles for you. My dear Maitreya, I am so satisfied by your words that I am not feeling any discomfort from hunger. I shall eat later. Please finish telling me about Dhruva. I am confused why he was unhappy. Maitreya settled back down. What do you find confusing? Verse 28, Vidur said, the only devotees who can please Krishna are those who neglect everything material and accept him alone as their life and soul. Krishna only allows such elevated souls into his abode. Due to Dhruva's wisdom and determination, he quickly achieved this position. Why then was he sad? Verse 29, he felt ashamed to have initially worshipped the Lord for a great kingdom and revenge on his stepmother. When he saw Vishnu, he became purified of these desires and asked for pure devotional service. However, the Lord did not at first promise this, but rather said he would satisfy Dhruva's original desire. Dhruva worried that Vishnu might have thought he still harbored his original intention. Then, when the Lord told him that Suruchi would suffer, he was reminded of his past envious nature. All this made him ashamed. Verses 30 and 31, Dhruva realized that to see the Supreme Lord face to face is difficult. Great sages like the 4 illustrious celibates, the Kumar brothers headed by Sanandan, practice Ashtanga Yoga for many births to meet the Lord. However, he had achieved the same result in just 6 months. He expected Vishnu to immediately take him back to his abode. Instead, he lost that opportunity because he began his worship with material desires. Thus he deeply lamented he had approached the Lord who could grant complete liberation and had been initiated into a Vishnu mantra by the great devotee Narad. That mantra is meant to elevate one to the spiritual world, but he foolishly chanted it for ephemeral material gain. This was his unhappiness. Verse 32, he berated the gods, thinking they may have perverted his intelligence from following Narad's advice to ignore Suruchi's insult. Why would he think that? Asked Vidur. Because the gods' positions are impermanent, that is Devi Devtas, who we write with the small g, not the capital, as we write for when we are referring to Lord Krishna, we use the capital or the uppercase letter. He thought that the gods might envy him being elevated to Vaikuntha. Verse 33, he also lamented how, influenced by the illusory energy, he falsely thought of his brother and stepmother as enemies. Vidur recalled how the Dhritarashtra's sons had antagonized the Pandavas. Is it always wrong to think of someone as an enemy? Maitreya said, seeing others in terms of friends and enemies is a mental construction. All living beings are the Supreme Lord's children, products of his marginal energy. It is only because we are contaminated by the modes of nature that we distinguish one spirit soul as a friend and another as an enemy. That's on the spiritual platform, replied Vidur, but when we are in material life, is it still false to think in terms of friends and enemies? Maitreya replied, a learned person sees that even on the material platform we are the same, since all bodies are nothing but a combination of the 5 elements. Vidur thanked Maitreya and asked him to continue explaining Dhruva's mentality. Verses 34 and 35, Maitreya said, Dhruva knew that although it is very difficult, he had somehow managed to please Lord Vishnu. The Lord could easily have given him liberation from birth and death, but instead had given him a kingdom. A worldly kingdom is worthless like medicine to a dead man. He censored himself for supplicating Vishnu with that desire. He compared himself to a poor man who approaches the emperor for charity. If the emperor is prepared to give a petitioner anything he wants, only the most foolish person would ask for a little rice. Constantly he rebuked himself, thinking, I could have been engaged in the Lord's personal service, but instead, out of pride, I wanted name, fame, and prosperity. What did he wish for? Asked Vidur. Verse 36, he wished he had been more like you. My dear Vidur, what do you mean? Pure devotees like you are attached to the honey of Krishna's lotus feet, and thus you are fully satisfied by hearing about and glorifying him. Since you are fully satisfied, you never ask the Lord for anything, neither material prosperity nor liberation from head. Please tell me what. Since Dhruva had left, he had engaged in harsh penance and austerity. Verse 37, heavy steps pounded through the palace corridors, stopping just outside the shrine room, fists rapped on the road. Your Majesty, the prince is here. Uttanpad cast an annoyed look in the direction of the door. Tell Uttam to go to his mother. I am not well and I do not wish to be disturbed again. Not Uttam, your Majesty. Prince Dhruv is home. The king leapt to his feet. Dhruva, how was that possible? No 5-year-old child could survive the hazards of the forest. Maybe they had found his corpse and brought it home for a funeral. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with his sobs. Surely he was the most wretched person. Again the guard banged on the door. Your Majesty, please open. Your son is coming. The prince is coming. Uttanpad slammed his fist into the door. It was impossible for a sinful like him to see his lost son alive. Verse 38, he threw open the door. How dare you taunt your king? The guard bowed low. Your Majesty, I speak the truth. Do you not remember that sage Narad predicted that he would return home? Uttanpad steadied himself against the open door. I thought he was trying to placate me. It seems not, Your Majesty. He spoke the truth. Scouts have spotted your son walking toward the city. Uttanpad's expression brightened. It must be true. After all, a great sage such as Narad Muni would not lie. Dhruva was alive. Uttanpad's body trembled and tears flowed down his face. He ran down the passageway. We must immediately arrange a royal greeting for the prince. He stopped briefly, took off a gem-studded gold necklace and handed it to the guard. Verses 39 and 40. After bathing and dressing in his finest regalia, Uttanpad mounted a chariot drawn by tall black steeds and bedecked with golden filigree. Accompanied by many learned Brahmins, all the elderly members of his family, his officers and ministers, and his immediate friends, he proceeded toward the outskirts of his kingdom. Auspicious sounds of conch shells, kettle drums, and flutes reverberated loudly along with the chanting of Vedic mantras that augured good fortune. Verse 41. The king sent a palanquin to bring Queen Suniti. She wept with joy on hearing the news and ran to invite Suruchi to accompany her. Suruchi shied away. Since Dhruva's departure, she had lost all the favor with the king. Only Suniti was allowed to join him in the shrine room. Wringing her hand, she said, I doubt Dhruva will want to see me. Suniti smiled. Do not think like that, my dear sister. You too are his mother. Suniti looked down at Uttam, who held onto his mother's sari. And you are his beloved brother. Both of you must come. Dhruva will be eager to see you. The palanquin is big enough for all three of us. Verses 42 to 43 now. The royal procession hurriedly wound through the crowded streets to the city's boundary. There Uttanpad sighted his son walking on the outskirts of a grove. He vaulted from his chariot. It was a miracle. The boy was back. Uttanpad had resigned himself to dying of grief, but his child had survived. Waves of affection surged through his heart as he raced toward his son. Then he caught up to Dhruva. The king was gasping for breath, but he swept Dhruva up in both arms, embracing him tightly. One Brahmin in the reception party remarked to another, the prince has changed. There seems to be a sacred aura emanating from him. His friend replied, it is to be expected. I have heard that he was touched by Lord Vishnu's lotus feet. Verse 44. Tears welled on the onlookers' eyes as they watched Uttanpad smell Dhruva's head again and again. He seemed to be bathing the small prince with torrents of tears. They knew that the king had been dreaming of this moment for the past 6 months. Verse 45. When Uttanpad finally released Dhruva from his embrace, the boy offered his obeisance and touched his father's feet. Uttanpad raised both his palms in blessings. May there be all good fortune for you, my dear son. Verse 46. Dhruva then bowed down at Suruchi's feet. She immediately lifted him up with tears in her eyes and in a choked voice, my dear boy, long may you live. The Prime Minister whispered in the ears of Chief Court Brahmin, she has never liked him. How is that she is so loving towards him now? Verse 47, the Chief Brahmin said, when someone is blessed by Vishnu, he develops all transcendental qualities. Everyone becomes automatically inclined to honor him. It is as natural as water flowing downwards. Verse 48, Dhruva spotted his younger brother Uttam, who was peering out from behind his mother's sari. As soon as their eyes met, Uttam gave up his reticence and flung himself into his elder brother's arms. They both laughed and cried as they hugged each other tightly. Suniti leaned over to Suruchi and said, see how happy they are to be reunited. They've both got goose pimples. Verses 49 and 50. She leaned over and drew Dhruva toward her arms. My son, you are dearer to me than very life. Reunited with you, I have forgotten all my grief. I have become the most fortunate woman, for I am the mother of a great hero. She embraced Dhruva tightly. Milk began flowing spontaneously from her breasts and, mixing with the tears, bathed Dhruva's entire body. The other women remarked, covered by his mother's milk and tears, it looks like the young prince is being washed in an Abhishek ceremony. This is very auspicious and surely an indication that in the near future he will be installed on his father's throne. Verse 51, the courtiers encircled mother and son. A senior lady in waiting said, Dear queen, your beloved son was lost a long time ago. Now it is your great fortune that he has returned. It is certain that your son will protect you from many years and put an end to your material miseries. Verse 51, the courtiers encircled mother and son. Yes, I've read that. Verse 52, another of Suniti's intimate ladies in waiting said, Dear queen, all this time Dhruva has been missing. You must have worshipped Lord Vishnu very sincerely. No small child can survive alone in the forest for so long. Only because of you constantly prayed to Vishnu for the prince's safety. He has returned safe and sound. Another lady said, Yes, those who constantly worship the Lord can conquer death, which is otherwise impossible to overcome. Verse 53, Uttanpad beamed with pleasure, hearing Dhruva praised. He arranged for Dhruva and Uttam to be seated on the back of a she-elephant, and the royal procession returned to the city. All the citizens crowded the streets as Dhruva passed. And they spoke excitedly, praising the young prince's exploits and achievements. Verses 54 to 59. Uttanpad had arranged for the entire city to be decorated in Dhruva's honor. Banana trunks with buds and flowers interspersed with betel nut trees lined the roads, which had arched engraved with mango leaves, colored flags and strings of pearls. And next to them were water pots and lamps in the city center. Mango leaves, colored flags and strings of pearls, and next to them were water pots and lamps. In the city center were many beautiful palaces, arches and boundary walls, which had been decorated with golden ornaments. The palace domes glittered in the sun, while gods hovered in golden airplanes above the city, bestowing blessings on Dhruva. The city squares, highways, lanes, markets, parks, and watchtowers had been cleansed, sprinkled with sandalwood water, and scattered with uncooked rice, fruits, flowers, and barley grains. The ladies sang welcoming songs, offered blessings, and showered Dhruva with auspicious articles as he rode along the highway and entered the palace. Verses 60 to 64. As the procession approached Suniti's palace, Dhruva made ready to alight, but the king checked him. You will now live with me. They entered Uttanpad's palace, whose walls were studded with countless gems, and Dhruva was escorted to his opulent quarters. The king took every opportunity to pamper his son. His lifestyle was so lavish that it resembled that the heavenly gods. The bedsteads were made of ivory and embellished with gold, and the soft bedding was as white as milk foam. All the furniture was crafted from gold, embedded with the marble. In the marble walls surrounding the palace were valuable jewels depicting images of beautiful women holding shining lamps. The palace was surrounded by lush gardens filled with trees which had been imported from the heavenly planets. In their branches were pairs of sweetly singing birds, and intoxicated bees hummed among the aromatic flowers. Among artificial lakes were dotted here and there in the grounds, reached by staircases made with valuable jewels like rubies and emeralds. Delightful garden houses stood by the lakes where pure white swans and pinkish cranes sported. Verses 65 and 66. Over the coming months, Uttanpad heard about his son's exploits in the forest. Dhruva told him how he had diligently worshipped Vishnu, and the king's eyes opened wide. How wondrous! He too had worshipped him every day, praying for the boy's return. The Lord was so kind. Uttanpad saw with great delight how nicely Dhruva dealt with everyone. The prince quickly became popular with the citizens, courtiers, ministers, generals, and Brahmins. Dhruva matured into an exceptional young man, and Uttanpad installed him as an emperor. Both his ministers and citizens applauded his decision as Dhruva was widely loved and respected. Verse 67, Uttanpa then thought of his own spiritual welfare. He had reached an advanced age and wanted to concentrate on cultivating the God consciousness. Detaching himself from the worldly affairs, he departed for the forest to practice penance and austerity. So we come to the end of chapter 9. Dhruva returns home, and we'll begin chapter 10 next time. King Dhruva fights the Yakshas. So thank you for being here. I wish you all a very blessed day ahead. Please chant and be happy. Hare Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.